I'd like to start with an observation. Now, I presume most of you is working in a hazardous workplace where there are some physical risks. And one thing that you probably all of you have been aware of is that there is a natural tendency to act unsafely, to cut corners in terms of safety, which is supposedly paradoxical. Why shall we act unsafely and risk ourselves? It seems irrational. What I'm going to suggest that it is a very rational decision-making. Let me start with a couple of studies that will illustrate my point. In one study, with the first bullet, BBS over there is behavior-based safety. It's an approach to safety that uses human behavior to explain why accidents or injuries take place. So I observed workers in 42 high-risk manufacturing companies or plants and 413 work groups. Okay, so I did the observation using students of mine to come in at random times during the workday, and we developed a checklist of unsafe behavior. And we wanted to check what's the percentage of unsafe behaviors taking place at these high-risk jobs. What we found is that 66% of the behavior that we observed, my students observed, only 66% were safe behavior. And if you flip it around, let's say 100% minus 66 safe behavior, it means that 44%, nearly 50, nearly half of the behaviors that we observed were unsafe. Okay? And of course, the question is, why do workers do it? And then we also we checked with the workers, when was the last time you had a conversation with your supervisor? And what was the conversation about? A work-related conversation. Okay? And I remind you again, these are high-risk companies in chemical industry, manufacturing, traffic, driving, and so on. Only 19% of the discussion, let's say 20% of the discussion, the daily conversation between worker and supervisors referred to any kind of safety issue. So what do they talk about? They talk about productivity and being on schedule and cutting costs and all sorts of technical issue. Safety doesn't come up very often, even though it's a high-risk job. So only 20% of the conversation, and by the way, in other studies that I did and other scientists did, it repeats itself, the same pattern. So nearly 50% of the behaviors are unsafe that we observe, and only 20% of the daily conversations with supervisors refer to safety. And as a psychologist, you start asking yourself, why do people tend to behave unsafely? I mean, certainly there's a very strong bias for behaving unsafely. And I'll use it I'll use safety culture to explain these results. The second bullet is a report that was published by the Worker Health Organization. It's a UN organization in Geneva. So they published a report in 2010 and say that failure to use protective gear, which is provided by the employer, by the enterprise owners, right, to the workers, only 30%, failure to use the personal protective equipment, which is already there. I'm not talking about companies that do not offer, say, personal protective equipment. account for 30% of lost workdays. So 1/3 of lost workers, of lost workdays due to injury are accounted by personal protective equipment which has been provided, but workers have not used it. Why don't they use it? Because it's uncomfortable, because if you have to use eyewear, it gets to be foggy and it obstructs your vision, because if you have to wear a helmet and it's hot and humid, you prefer not to. And the same goes for shoes, safety shoes, and everything else. So workers take risk, and say, although, I do have these goggles, they just hang it, next to the machine. They don't wear it really as they ought to. So the arrow there, the green arrow, the bottom of the slide, says pretty much that what the data show us, and as I said before, I'm sure most of you, all of you have witnessed it at your own workplaces, that there is a strong tendency for workaround. Workarounds is a word in English that refers to cutting corners on safety. So I should have used the goggles, but I don't. I should have checked the pressure in the pipe before I start, in the chemical plant, before I start some chemical mixing of chemical materials, but I really don't, because it takes time until the pressure reaches the safe level. So I start at an under pressure or over pressure to save time and to increase productivity and so on. So there is a very strong tendency to cut corners, which is in English called workarounds. Interestingly, the same phenomenon accounts for worker behavior, but it also accounts for managers' behavior. And since most of you are workers here, I can assure you that your managers, direct supervisors, department managers, and senior managers, they suffer from the same bias, or they exhibit the same bias for unsafe behavior. Now, managers do not stand on the line and perform the operations, but they are the ones who have to offer the budget for safety equipment, and if they wish to increase profitability, they don't, they reduce it, they say it's hard economic times, there is a lot of competition, we're losing market share, so they cut on investing in safety from their perspective. So it's not the workers' fault, it's the really responsibility of human nature. And even if you get from a worker, you're being promoted to supervisor and department manager, or become senior manager, it's the same, we all exhibit the same universal human attributes. So the question is, where is it coming from, this tendency, and how can it be reversed? Because obviously, if we're talking about prevention, which is really why we are here today, we have to understand this strong tendency for unsafe behavior in order to be able to reverse it and then improve safety. So safety is not an integral part of performing the job. I can perform the job safely or unsafely. And the best example, because I'm not sure which industries you work in, so I cannot, and you probably come from different industries, those of you here, I use the example of a driver. We all have driver license, we all drive, right? If I wish to get from Granada to Sevilla, right? I can drive according to the speed limit. I can keep distance between cars. I can, do the maintenance with my car, and so on and so forth. Now, the point is, I can get from point A to point B. I can get to Sevilla if I drive safely or unsafely, right? So getting from Granada to Sevilla doesn't depend on the safety of my driving, right? The same goes at work, if I have to produce 3 boxcars for railway, I used to work, I did a very large project in Canada where they produce, for train, they produce the cars, freight cars, right? And they had to produce over there 3 cars per shift, per work shift. A lot of welding, okay, and steel and so on. Some workers were working safely. Their productivity was slower because when you work safely, it takes more time. And some were working less safely and produced a bit more, okay? The welders in this company, the productivity was measured by the length of the weld that they produce per hour and the quality of the welding. So they have quality inspectors and they check it, okay? Now, why did they call me, this factory in Canada? Because they have a major accident issue, a lot of burns and so on. When I came to the company and I started to check what are they rewarded for? It turns out that they are rewarded for productivity, the number of meters they weld and the quality of the welding. Acting safely was not rewarded at all. Now, it's a high-risk occupation. This company in Canada had, for the year before I started to do a project there, had not a single day without injury. Every day, at least one worker went to the doctor or nurse and had to be treated. Okay, not a single day. And what did management reward? Productivity, not safety. So what's the right decision for workers in this company? If they reward me for productivity, why should I act safely and really lower the benefits or the rewards for my work? Okay? So safety is not part of the work. You somehow have to reward it, and it's a management sort of strategy, and this is where safety culture will come in when I get to talk about it. So the point is, and that's the second bullet in my slide, that safety entails investment of non-productive individual effort. So to work safely, usually I have to do something extra. I have to measure something, and I'll give you examples in a minute, or else it entails investment of organizational resources, mostly money, euros, which lowers my profitability, at least in the short run. So a driver can say, I've been driving for 30 years. I've been driving always about 10 to 15 kilometers above the speed limit. Even when it rains, I keep my speed, even though I know that the road is more slippery, and so on and so forth. Nothing happened. A worker next to you may tell you the same thing, right? So if a guy next to you is a welder, and he or she work unsafely, and they tell you, listen, I've been working like this for 30 years. I had no accident. So what's the decision? To act unsafely, because it's a low likelihood event. And that's key to understanding why people behave unsafely, right? When you behave unsafely, you don't have to invest extra resources. The work is more fun. Driving is more fun. I like to drive a bit fast, even when it's rainy or whatever, right? Or foggy, right? And nothing happens because it's a low likelihood event, which make people really understand that it should make you people understand that because accidents are rare events in a given company, in a given unit in a company, even if it's a large company, because it's a low likelihood event, there is a tendency to take some risks. Now, you should not misunderstand me. People are not going to risk their lives and act unsafely. When I say act unsafely and workarounds, means cutting corners, not doing stupid things, right? So all of us have a certain tendency to act unsafely, to cut corners within limit, right? And nothing happens. So that reinforces a tendency for unsafe behavior. So the red bullet, the red ink there, it says, the third bullet, this tendency affects workers and managers alike. And in English there is a saying, I'm sure in Spanish too, it won't happen to me. I've been doing it for 30 years, so don't talk to me about prevention. You know? It's all, and excuse my English, bullshit. You know, that's pretty much, that's how they resist you, you know. And when safety people come to try to affect managers' behavior, it's very difficult. Because they say, you want me to invest more and more in safety, but it's not going to happen, you know, anytime soon, not during my, you know, term as a department manager or senior manager and so on. So that's why safety is so difficult to promote. Even though I wasn't sure what you talked about at the beginning of the presentation because of my lack of Spanish, but I'm sure you've been talking that that's the right thing to do, which is right. But how do you change their behavior? And this is again where safety culture is going to come into. A couple of examples and then we'll keep going. Example, if you have to stop the production of a certain unit in your company, doesn't matter whether it's a chemical industry or electric or whatever, for preventive maintenance, which is the right thing to do in terms of safety and prevention, because preventive maintenance is very effective in reducing accidents. It's well known. But then you increase your production cost. Because you close your unit for 3 days, let's say, depend on the industry, it costs you thousands and thousands of dollars, if not more than that. Okay? Or the second point, invest $1 or €1 in installing machine guards or replacing rusty pipes if it's in the chemical industry. You increase your cost. And as I said before, investment in safety is a non-productive investment. You know, you can argue that it prevents injuries, which cost a lot of money. But then, if you prevented injuries, no one knows about it, including you, because you've done the right thing. And maybe if you would, you know, wait 6 months or 2 years to replace a rusty pipe, you'd have increased your profitability, no accident had taken place, so it really increases the bias to cut corners on safety. And the same one, the example C, wait until a pressure relief valve reaches the required safe level and you fall behind schedule because you have to wait longer. I've seen companies in chemical industry where if you follow all the safety rules of the company, even I'd say it more severely. I would ask a company manager or unit manager in a chemical plant, give me the 3 most important or the 5 most important safety rules for your production unit, right? So and then I'm checking, again, usually I send students or observers and so on, how often are these safety rules being violated or being monitored? And the results are pretty much as in my initial study. About 30% of the time they're being violated in our observations. So my red, at the bottom of the slide with the arrow, it says that the workaround, the cutting of safety corners, is a rational choice under ordinary, even if it's risky work, right? So it maximizes gains, profits, and cutting costs, and so on. And there are no immediate costs because injury is a low likelihood event. Okay? Now, I spent a lot of time on it because if you want to understand my approach to safety culture, you have to keep it in mind because this is my sort of logic of thinking about it. So, I'm going to talk now about safety climate. Again, we have no time to discuss the difference between safety climate and culture, and I only say that safety climate is a way to measure safety culture. Culture is a thing that's difficult to measure. Climate can be easily measured with a questionnaire. So you can have a questionnaire which has 20 items or 30 items. In other words, a questionnaire that takes between, I'd say, 10 minutes and 15 minutes. So up to a quarter of an hour to complete. Okay? And it pretty much, the climate score that you get is a very good estimate or proxy of the culture. So in industry, usually we measure climate rather than culture, even though safety consultants and so on pretty much tend to mix the two. They're not identical, but they're very similar. Okay? The point is, and that's the blue ink, that safety culture as measured by climate, it really, it's like an upper layer for safety engineering. So safety engineers have to take care of chemical hazards, how to measure it, how to protect against it, develop all sorts of monitoring devices and sirens that inform you that something wrong is taking place and so on. So safety engineering is like the foundation of safety. My point is that safety culture or climate adds another floor, like above the first floor. It's like the second floor, and I'll show you the results that indicate that it plays a very important role. In simple words, what I'm saying, safety engineering is not enough. It's the foundation. It's critical. We cannot do without it. But if we wish to continue and improve safety in our company, in our enterprise, we have to also to speak about safety culture and human behavior, because culture is pretty much an aspect of human behavior. There is data here. I won't go much into it, except to say that these are results of more than 200 studies that tested the effect of safety climate on safety behavior. So the sample here is about 200 studies conducted in various industries and in various countries around the world. Okay, so the results of the meta-analysis are very robust. You can really trust it. Okay, what it shows, and let me just point it here. So it's a strong predictor of safety behavior, and then of near misses and accidents and injuries. Now, the reason why I chose this example, it compares the effect of safety climate, which is human behavior, human perception, and in a minute you'll understand what safety climate, how is it measured. When you compare it to risks and hazard, which represent the engineering-based approach, right? Because engineers identify hazards and develop ways to control it, right? So unprotected risks and hazard also predict safety compliance and the near misses, accidents, and injuries. However, when you compare safety climate with unprotected risks and hazards, there are some numbers there which I wouldn't go into. The numbers indicate that the relationship, the strength of the relationship between safety climate and safety behavior compliance, right, is stronger than the effect of unprotected risks and hazards. Essentially, what this graph says, based on more than 200 scientific studies, is that safety culture or safety climate is more strongly related to unsafe behavior than risks and hazards. And it's more strongly related to accidents and injuries than unprotected risks and hazards. So what this graph suggests is that if you wish to improve safety at the workplace, no doubt you have to, your approach ought to be based on safety engineering, but if you leave out the human element, human behavior, human perceptions, or safety culture, then you really lose the chance to sort of witness a significant improvement on safety. So when we talk here today about safety culture, is really to educate you about the importance of measuring and improving safety culture at the workplace based on the data, because I'm a scientist and everything I say here is based on scientific research and publications. And by the way, I'm going to mention it. Safety consultants, and many of you may have had safety consultants that work with you. These are professionals that, as a scientist, I don't trust. And believe me, I have evidence for that. Okay? The safety consultants have conflict of interest. You know, they're looking for customers, they're looking for company to consult to, and quite a lot of the things they tell you are not science-based. They have their own intuitions, they work in a company that have, you know, sort of a history of using one approach rather than the other. They don't follow the scientific development in the field, and when things change, they keep talking about things that, as scientists, you know, we talked about 10 or 15 years ago, and they're not aware of new developments and so on. So I don't want to say don't use safety consultants. All I'm saying, when you do work with safety consultants, you have to be quite critical or cautious, and don't trust whatever they tell you. That's pretty much the only thing I'll say about safety consultants. Even though I do my own consulting, but it's quite different in a sense that my consulting is all science-based. And if I have no answer, I don't try to figure out something to, you know, to maintain you as my customer or whatever. So that's, you know, something that differs between us. Now the question is, I'm getting now to safety culture. Pretty much what safety culture is all about is about the perception of employees, and that's the first bullet, right? The safety climate or safety culture perceptions appraise the reward structure in my company, affecting the choice of safe versus unsafe behavior. So if I, as a worker in the company or as a supervisor in the company, realize that performing safely pays me less, give me less rewards than meeting production deadlines or cutting production costs, increasing productivity, right? If it pays less, the safety culture score, the safety climate score will be lower because safety is rewarded less than productivity and cutting costs, right? And then I'm going to take risks. And vice versa, right? If I realize that in my company, working safely, and if I'm a supervisor, if my workers, right, work safely, it being recognized by my department manager, and I get rewarded, and I'll talk about rewarding in a minute, then I'm going to emphasize safety. The safety culture score will get higher, and the likelihood of injury will get smaller. So what I'm suggesting now is something, remember I talked a lot about the tendency to act unsafely and cut corners, right? What I'm suggesting is that we all are rational human beings. okay, with certain biases of human memory and decision making and so on. But basically, we live our life in a rational manner. So if I'm working in a company that recognizes safety more than productivity or more than cutting costs, I'm going to act more safely because I want to maximize the rewards for my work. So the tendency for workarounds, for cutting safety corners, can be reversed if I'm going to be able to reverse the reward structure in my company. So it's really this is the major revolution of safety culture. What it really says, the responsibility of safety does not lay on the shoulders of the workers. It's not human error that resulted in an accident. It's not an improper decision of a worker that resulted in an accident. What resulted in an accident are the managers or the leaders in the company, right? That determine the reward structure for safety that can reverse the tendency. That's a revolution, because managers feel very easily to lay the blame not on themselves but on the workers. But what safety culture says, it's the other way around. The responsibility lays on you guys, the manager, the immediate supervisor, the department manager, and senior management, in terms of their reward structure. What I'm saying essentially is, there is a saying in English, and I hope that the translator, she's a good translator. You cannot fool everybody all the time. Okay? You cannot say that safety is our most important priority in the company, but the workers observe that although you're saying as a manager that safety is our most important priority, but when time comes to invest in safety, equipment or any kind of devices or following safety procedures, and you turn, or my supervisor turn a blind eye when he sees me that I violate safety rule because it increases production, you cannot fool me. So the beauty of the concept of safety culture, these are worker perceptions that are based on reality, because you cannot fool me all the time and all my co-workers in the department. You cannot say that safety is your most important priority. And again, I'll give you just one example. In one company I worked with, they had a lot of traffic injuries between forklifts, that drive, and workers that walk around. Okay, so management used to lay the blame on workers because they painted sort of the yellow lines where workers are supposed to go, to walk around, not cross, not cutting the distance by crossing the yellow lines, and then a truck lift driver wouldn't see them because it's of the load, and they had quite a number of injuries there, severe injuries. When I started to speak with the workers, you know what they told me? Managers talk about safety, and it was a high-risk refinery, sort of, high-risk operation. What they said, management says that safety is very important, right? But if they wish to reduce injuries for a forklift truck hitting a pedestrian, a worker that walks, right? They could have bought video cameras in front, because very often the load wouldn't let them see who is walking in front of them, and also in the back. But it's expensive, and they try to save costs. So they haven't bought these video cameras. Okay? So the workers got the idea. Manager can talk as much as they want about safety, but if it comes to spending, I don't know, $10,000, $50,000 on video equipment before, in front and behind the forklift, they don't do it. So you cannot fool all of us all the time. And that's the beauty of the safety culture. It really gives you a precise measure, okay, in terms of numbers, quantitative, right? In terms of workers' perceptions of the real commitment, the true commitment of management to our safety. It's not what management says, that about safety, because all management in the world, or certainly in the Western culture, say that employee safety and health is the most important thing. But do they invest in it? So the difference between what the management says about safety and what management does, that's the essence of safety culture. Because the safety culture would measure what the perception of the workers through their eyes. What does management do? How do they act to improve safety, not what they say. Okay? So the second bullet says, when we measure safety climate, it answers a question like, is meeting deadlines more important than complying to safety rules? Okay, and again, if I'm getting rewarded more for meeting deadlines than for working safely, I'm going to act by cutting safety corners, workarounds. Number two, is it better for me to cut safety corners in order to work faster or to cut costs? So these are the items that we use to measure safety culture. The third bullet, whenever safety goals are rewarded financially or socially, and I'll talk about it in a minute, less than competing goals, a rational choice, which is my first slide, would be to cut corners, to employ at-risk behavior. Of course, you should remember, it's all true as long as the perceived chances of injury remain low. Okay? And the last bullet on this slide, when everyone agrees, now this is, I'm now defining what safety climate culture is all about. When everybody around me in my work unit, in my department, agrees, right, about the rewards for safety behavior, then we can talk about culture or climate. Because culture or climate is a social phenomenon. When we talk about national culture, right? When I come to Spain and I see that when something has to start at a certain hour, and then I observe that it never starts on time, and it starts 15 minutes late, or more than that, and everybody agrees that it's okay. It's part of the culture. Then I say part of the Spanish culture is a fairly relaxed approach to timing. Okay? When I visit the US, God forbid that you start 1 minute late, And if you're late to a meeting, you really apologize and so on. You feel very uncomfortable. Okay? So when everybody in a society or in an organization, right, shares the same approach to several things, then it turns from an individual level perception to a culture. So this is what culture is about. Okay? So when everyone, now returning to safety, in my unit, in my department, right, shares the assessment that safety is a low priority aspect of work compared to cutting costs and so on, then we can talk that culture emerges because everybody agrees with me. If I'm the exception, it's not a culture. So climate or culture emerge when everybody around me agrees with me. Okay? And then we can talk about culture or climate. Okay, so and that's why I mean it's a social phenomenon, because people around me have to agree. Okay, so there can be a culture for a particular work unit, and in a other work unit in the same company, there can be a different culture. They will be related because the two units belong to the same company. and are affected by an overall conception. But at least for us, you know, we refer to it in science as subcultures. Subculture, not a lower culture, but simply if, I'll give a very simple example. If we have maintenance people and production people, there probably will be some differences between the maintenance workers and the production workers. Okay? Measuring safety climate, let me just give you, I'll just refer to the lower part. It's based on a scale that I developed for measuring safety culture in 2005, and the items, just to make sure that you understand what we talk about. The items to measure safety culture would be: my supervisor refuses to ignore safety rules when work falls behind schedule. Okay? So remember I say you can't fool me, you can't fool everybody all the time? So workers pick up situations in which safety competes with something else which is important for the company. When work falls behind schedule, it has meaning in terms of customer satisfaction and in terms of our efficiency and shipment dates and so on. So when production falls behind schedule, do my supervisor turn a blind eye to safety because all he or she wants us is to catch up and, you know, maintain the schedule? Or does he or she, my supervisor, right, still pays attention to safety? So this is a very particular situation that serves as a test case for how much is my supervisor really committed to my safety or to our safety in this unit. Or the second item, my supervisor is strict about working safely when we are tired or stressed. So by the end of the workday, we may be tired, we may be stressed because there was some disruption in the production process. Does my supervisor still pays attention to safety? These are the rewards that if everybody agree about these two items, right, we'll get a higher score for safety, climate, or culture. Okay? And the second one refers to questions about senior management in our company. So senior management quickly corrects any safety hazard, even if it's costly. Remember the example I gave you about the video cameras in front and behind a forklift, right? These are expensive. At least it's an example. I mean, today they're less, but I'm giving an example from like 10 years ago or so that came to my mind at this moment. It was relatively expensive, especially if you had to multiply it. I think they had like 50 forklift trucks. So it's a sizable investment, right? So if management quickly correct any safety hazard, even if it's costly, means they do care about safety. So we'll get a higher safety culture score. And the second item, senior management considers safety when setting production speed and schedules. So even if they wish to improve production speed by 10%, do they do it by compromising safety issues, or do they do it without compromising? So again, you cannot fool everybody all the time. So workers pick up. There are, like in science, we refer to practical scientists. These are we're all practical scientists. It doesn't depend on having gone to university or college and having a degree. It's simply setting up, looking at reality, analyzing it, choosing the situation to test what happens, and then drawing conclusions. This is what we do as formal scientists. But all of us can observe situations that really tell us what is the real commitment of management to my safety. And this is where safety culture really, this is how it's being measured. And remember the previous graph, right here, that using the items like the ones I've presented, results in a very strong prediction of compliance to safety rules, near misses, and accidents and injuries. The question is, okay, if safety culture is such a strong predictor of injury and accidents, how can we improve it? Okay, so right now, I mean, we're at the stage in safety climate research and safety culture research about trying to develop interventions to improve safety climate because it's just such a strong predictor. So I'm going to present you three strategies that can be used to improve safety culture. Now, these are strategies that I use. Okay, when I develop, that I use and other people use, these are strategies that I've developed and published in scientific journals. One major characteristic of my approaches is that safety intervention or improvement of safety culture must be cost effective. In simple words, it should not cost much. Because management, although they speak about safety endlessly, they're really hesitant in investing in safety. And I've been talking about it before. So if I'm going to offer you a training program as a consultant, let's say, that will cost the company, I don't know, 100,000 euros, maybe management will buy it, maybe not, I'm not sure. My approach is that the strategies I'm going to describe to you are very cost effective. They don't cost much. Okay? And another characteristic of my approach, again, unlike consultants, I like to share my knowledge with the people in the company, with safety managers, safety and health managers. In consultants really pretty much prefer to keep their knowledge, their expertise to themselves. So you keep being dependent on them. So I have a very different operating mode when offering consulting to companies. The three strategies that I'll present to you have been tested in scientific projects and proven effective. The first one is safety leadership training. Okay? What is safety leadership training? The reason why I chose to focus on leadership or safety leadership is that in culture research in organizations, managers are one of the most important factors affecting the culture in the organization. Why? You should be aware of it already. Because managers control the rewards, right? And if they're going to reward safety behavior more than they currently do, safety culture would improve. Safety behavior or safety compliance to safety rules will improve, and the likelihood of injury will decrease. So the reason why I chose leadership here is based on a very extensive body of research about the importance of leaders as a major determinant of culture. So what I'm suggesting here is a very basic model of leadership. There are quite more sophisticated models of leadership, but they are hard to measure and hard to modify. What I'm saying, effective supervisors forget safety at the moment, because safety and general functioning and safety functioning are very closely linked together. So there is a research, and there is a body of research that says that effective supervisors on a daily basis, they do two things. They frequently monitor their workers' performance. Now, frequent monitors by walking, it's called walking rounds. They don't sit in the office and ask other people, what's happening down there on the floor, on the production floor. They get up, they leave the office, and they take a tour. So they can directly observe their workers' performance. So effective leaders, number one, do frequent monitoring, frequent walk rounds. What is frequent? 2-3 times a day. Depend on the technology and so on. But when I say frequent, means between 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 times a day. Okay? And once they complete their walking tours, right, the monitoring, they do one more thing. They offer consequences. So if I observe the worker that violated the safety rule, what effective supervisors do, they offer immediate feedback to the persons that they observed violating a safety rule. So they can offer a positive feedback, like, I've seen that you've really waited for the pressure to go up or down in the pipe before, stopping the production process or starting whatever. This is a positive feedback. So the worker knows that I behave safely and I've been recognized by my supervisor. It's a positive feedback. A negative feedback is say that I noticed that you started the production above or below the required safe, pressure levels and so on. So that's one thing that effective supervisors do. A second one, which is on the second bullet, is goal setting. Goal setting is probably the strongest theory or the strongest model that explains human motivation. So is there a motivation now to invest in safety? I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that investing in safety, it very often lessens the fun at work. It's unpleasant to wear personal protective equipment, you have to do extra things, you have to wait more time, and so on. So how can I increase the motivation to act safely? Okay? And goal setting is a very simple and very, very effective way for doing it, and it requires two things. Number one, you have to set specific and observable goals. So you have to say, when you start production, I'd like you to wait, until pressure goes above or below a certain limit. So it's a very specific goal, okay? And it's also observable. So now if I'm doing my daily walk rounds, the observation tours, right? I can easily observe whether this particular worker is following the rules, right? Is waiting for the pressure to go up or down. So you have to set very specific safety rules. What I'm saying, and again, it's got to be realized, in most companies, and I assume in your companies as well, very often managers talk about safety as an abstraction. Hey guys, I want you to be aware that it's a very hazardous job. Hey guys, I want you to check this and that, But there's nothing specific that applies to the work the workers are going to do today on this coming work shift. And the work changes. The work is dynamics, unless it's a very, very routine work. Okay? So the goal-setting theory says you should not talk about safety in a very abstract manner. Be careful, keep your eyes open, blah, blah, blah. It has no effect on human behavior, by the way. Speaking about safety as an abstraction. The only way it's going to work is when your job today is to depressurize and so on, it has to reach this particular level. So you have to somehow connect safety with a daily activity, okay? And be specific, and it should be observable. So that's one aspect of goal setting. The second aspect, you should offer incentives by goal progress. Incentive is like consequences in the model of leadership, right? If you have observed the worker to follow the safety rule for today, you should offer him a feedback, him or her, a feedback, positive feedback. If you notice the violation, negative feedback, okay? What I did, I developed a sort of a workshop, half-a-day workshop. Sometimes it's a full-day workshop, where you can teach supervisor. It's really directed at first-line supervisors. How to conduct safety observations, right? How to offer immediate consequences. I use scenarios. In each company that I work with, the first stage would be to develop scenarios that are characteristic for this company in which safety goals compete with production goals and cutting costs and so on, right? So we use scenarios that takes like 2 months to develop. We use scenarios during the workshop to practice it, right? So if we have a workshop with 20 supervisors, right, and after I sort of present the main ideas, we use scenarios and say, okay, read this scenario, and what will you do now? You know, you can practice it. And then once the participant, the supervisor, practice it, I offer them feedback which is provided by the company's safety managers. Okay? Was it good? Was it bad? And so on. And that's the way I proceed. The next bullet talks about the top incentive at work. There is research, and again, no time to say, that financial incentives are about as effective or as social incentives. The problem with financial incentive is that they cost money. And very often manager or senior management would be reluctant, would be unwilling to offer financial rewards for safety. So there is research, thank God I would say, that social incentives that cost nothing in terms of dollars or euros and are just as effective in affecting human behavior. And the social incentive, it's in the sort of in the script, the violet kind of script. Social incentive include two incentives. Predictive recognition. So if I'm seeing a worker who's been behaving safely, right? And I say, I noticed that you waited, you know, before you started the operation. That's an incentive. Now, it's incentive, there is a word there, predictive recognition. It becomes an incentive only when worker tests me, and workers always test us as managers, that those guys who've been recognized more frequently by the supervisor have better chances for promotion, for becoming a team leader, for being chosen to operate a different machine, which they like to operate, being sent to some training, technical training, and so on. So recognition becomes effective only if it's predictive of future actual rewards. Otherwise, it's just words, and workers start to pretty much ignore it because it doesn't mean much. You tell me how great I am, but when time came to choose someone to become a shift manager, you chose someone else, not me. Okay? So the recognition has to be predictive, and it has to be immediate. The sooner you offer the feedback to workers after the observation, the greater effect it has on their behavior. The final point in the red ink, discipline alone is least effective. So very often safety programs are based only on discipline, only on punishment. You know, there's no positive rewards. And that's very clear in terms of science. It's a very ineffective approach to managing human behavior. Why is it? Because it creates organizational misbehavior. Because the people that got disciplined, they will look for ways to get back at you. They will not inform you of things. They will do things that hurt the business unit or the production unit and so on. Okay, I pretty much talked about it, so I can skip it. And here is a summary of what I said. Look just on the left side box, which pretty much summarizes what I've just said. Okay, so safety leadership, I said, it concerns of setting daily safety goals. That's the goal-setting aspect. Conducting frequent daily monitoring, and offering consequences, positive or negative consequences. The next box refers to safety climate, which is the next strategy that I'm going into. So after if I talk, you can, you have your handouts, you can go back to it. The second strategy, so the first strategy is developing effective safety leadership. Okay? The second strategy is focuses on the measurement of safety climate, sort of monthly measurement of safety climate. So the second strategy is based on repeated measurement of safety culture on a monthly basis. Okay? So every month for the duration of the intervention. I'm going to use a scale to measure the culture level. Okay? How does it work? It works like this. Number one, first we start with a full-length measurement scale of safety culture, right? Based on the full scale, the full scale takes about 20-25 minutes to complete, if it's a real full scale. I can use some statistical techniques to shorten the number of items, to decrease the number of items, such that the scale can be completed. Usually I prefer 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. So it should be a very brief scale that measures culture. Okay? And then once I developed a brief scale, okay, and very often, it depends. The brief scale can be also industry specific. So in the chemical industry, we should measure safety climate a little bit different than in manufacturing industry and so on. So we can adjust the items a bit. But again, the point is that we should end up with a scale that takes about 5 minutes to 7 minutes at most to complete. And then every month I send the scale to a sample of employees, not all of them, to a sample, randomly chosen employees, okay, within each production unit. I send them the brief scale, usually by mail, email, or by phone. It's a web-based scale. It doesn't have to be a paper and pencil. And so 20% of the employees in each production unit get the scale each month. Okay? So they fill the scale, and then I analyze the data. It's very simple. It all can be programmed to be done online. Okay? And so if I collected for the first month a climate for every unit in the company, by the end of the month, right, I can offer feedback to the unit manager and say, your climate level or culture level is so and so. Okay? And let me just show you. I'm sorry. I'll talk about something else on the next strategy. Your climate or culture level in so and so, and if I compare your climate or culture level to the average of all the departments, all the units in the company, you can see how far you're below or above the enterprise average score of the culture. Okay? And then I asked the unit manager, Remember I talked about goal setting? Can you set a goal where next month I'm going to measure your unit again? Okay, the second time. Where would you like your score to be, your culture score would like to be a month from now? Okay? I offer them some very basic guidelines, like would you like to see it like 10% improvement within a month or 15% improvement? Okay? So every unit manager sets a goal for the culture for next month. Okay? And then comes the second time. I collect the data, I offer feedback, and he sets goals. And then comes the third month, and so on and so forth. So let me give you an example of, this is what I did in a chemical company, large chemical company. Now, the reason I was there, they had a safety issue with their subcontractors, okay? And they had 7 major subcontractors. So they say, we pretty much know how to handle safety with our own employees. Our subcontractors is a major issue for us, okay? So what I did is, before starting the project, I hired 2 safety experts that conducted safety auditing. Now, safety auditing is, maybe you're aware of it, are experts that take a number of work rounds in every business unit or in every production unit in the company, and they monitor the number of unprotected hazards at this production unit. Electrical hazards, chemical hazards, temperature hazards, pressure hazards, and whatnot, okay? So they have a checklist, and there are available checklists, by the way. One of the best is by European Union body that I use quite a lot. The hazards that the audits refer to for my project are hazards that are controllable by the workers and by the supervisor of each production unit. I'm not talking about hazards that are there because senior management refuses to invest money in hazards, right? Because I have no control over what senior management does. I do have control in this project about the behavior. I hope to have an effect on the behavior and decision-making of the workers and supervisors in this particular production unit. Okay? So the safety, when I started the project, these are before the broken line, these are the safety audits, right? That were done by 2 independent safety experts. They computed their scores independently, and then I correlated it and computed the average. Okay, so these were the levels of safety for the 7 contractors for this company. And then the numbers, a number of months, the intervention took 12 months. It's a 1-year project, okay? Every month I used a brief safety culture scale, right? Conducted measures of the level of safety culture in each production unit. And by the end of the month, I offered feedback to each production unit manager, okay? And the production unit manager set goals to themselves. So as you can see, from month to month, there is general improvement in safety culture. Now, you should be aware of the fact, this particular intervention did not involve safety leadership development, like in the previous strategy. The only thing involved is measuring culture every month, offering feedback, setting goals with the manager, each manager for the next month, and it continued. So as you can see, for 6 of the 7 subcontractors, there was continuous improvement. The one subcontractor with the blue ink, it's contractor number 5, right? There was, initially there was some improvement, but then there was deterioration. Okay? So for the 6 contractors, by the end of 12 months, I asked the same 2 safety experts to conduct safety audit again. Because I really wanted to test, remember I told you about being scientist versus consultant. Rather than claiming success, I said I've got to offer the company management information about did the safety culture improvement affected safety level in your company. So the safety audits really offer objective information collected by 2 safety experts. The safety experts were not aware of the intervention and what happened and so on. They were just asked to conduct the audits before the intervention and then a year later. As you can see, there is a significant improvement in safety audit scores. It's at the beginning before the broken line, and by the end it's immediately after the broken line. So essentially what I can claim now as a scientist even, that this strategy of monthly measurement of safety culture, number 1, improves safety culture significantly, and of course I use statistical tests to show significant improvement, and also improve the safety audit scores significantly. Okay? The one contractor, the number 5 contractor, was terminated by the company. Okay? They simply chose a different contractor. And my last strategy is what's going on. Remember in my first slide today, I told you that when I did this large study of 42 companies, I realized that they talk very little about safety during daily conversations. So here I focus on what's happening in daily conversations between supervisors and workers. You know, keep your eyes open, be alert, and so on. Has no effect on human behavior, we know it. So I wanted to see if they include safety in the daily discussion. So when they talk, you know, on the phone or face-to-face or whatever, right? They talk about what I've been doing right now. And you say, listen, you know, I have this problem with this instrument, or we are proceeding very nicely. Does the supervisor refer to safety in this context of their daily conversation? Was there anything mentioned about safety? Okay? So this is pretty much, I'm a bit behind schedule, so I wouldn't go in details into it. But all I'm saying is that the system, the intervention goes like that. For each supervisor, for each production unit manager, I collect information about 7 to 9 discussions, right, conversations for each supervisor. And then I compute the average score. How often during your last 7 to 9 conversation with your workers, how often was safety included in your conversation with workers? Okay, so I compute an average score. Okay? What you can see, this is the kind of feedback. So every 7 or 9 conversation, which pretty much takes about a month to collect, 7 to 9 conversation and analyze. The supervisors or the business unit manager or production unit manager receive feedback as well. Okay, so I'm using the same ideas really. They use a feedback in which, and this is pretty much what it looks like, paragraphs, and they say what it says that in the last 7 to 9 conversation you've had with your workers, if you see the first red arrow refers to speed, which is productivity, which is really the competing demand to safety. How much do you emphasize speed, you know, catching up, you know, working faster and so on, which means cutting corners on safety. So as you can see in the right side bar, which is light color, right? This is the first feedback. there was a lot more emphasis on safety than on the second bar, the dark color bar. So on the first month, I'm presenting here only 2 feedback sessions, not more. On the first feedback, there was a lot of emphasis on speed. On the second, after we collected another round of 7 to 9 discussions or conversations, there was a lot less emphasis on speed. Okay? But then you also see the lines. The dotted red line above the bars, right? This is the organization means, namely the other unit managers participating in this project. This is, what their emphasis on speed. So you're in this is, for example, for one particular supervisor. Okay? So you talk about speed a lot less than the others. Okay? The black mark, right? These are individual goals. We ask him for the next round, a month from now, the next conversation, right? That you're going to conduct. How much do you wish to emphasize speed? So as you see, the black sign is a lot less than the average in the company. So this is what the manager was aiming at. And the same goes for safety. That's the second red mark, red arrow, right? They emphasize safety a lot less on the first round of feedback, right? That's the bright color, the light color, and then the black color indicates that there was a lot more emphasis on safety on the second round. So using very simple techniques of feedback, it was possible really to modify their behavior from one month to the other. I use feedback, I use goal setting, I use the same principles that I described before based on their daily conversations. Now, in this particular project, the company, it's the same type of results. I divided half the production unit. It was a heavy manufacturing company. Half the production units were part of the experimental group where supervisors or unit managers received feedback every month. The control group, we collected the data, but the supervisors received no feedback whatsoever. Those of you who studied science, it's a very basic scientific design. Like doctors do it, half the patients receive the real medication, if it's a new medication, and half the patient receive placebo. Namely, it looks like the real thing, but it's made of some white material. I don't know what it's made of, but there's no effect. So that's the experimental group versus control group. It's a very basic design, and I use the same design. What you can see here is before the intervention. So before the intervention, that's the T1, right? There was no difference in safety culture score, safety climate score, right? Between the experimental and the control group. They were the same, which is nice, right? After the end of the intervention, right, the experimental group, namely the managers that received feedback about the extent of including safety in their conversation, there was significant improvement in the level of safety culture or safety climate. And the control group, there was no effect, which is a very nice way to say that what I did really affected management behavior. Their worker, they monitor their behavior of their manager. They realize that they talk about safety a lot more. Remember, you can't fool us all the time, but if you consistently refer to safety during, right, then there is a significant improvement in safety culture. The next one talks about safety behavior. So what we found is that in the experimental group, there was, safety behavior was observed by my students. They would come for the units belong to the experimental group, control group, and record safety violations. So there was significant improvement in safety behavior, namely a lot less violations. There was also some improvement in the control group, but the difference here was significant as well. So offering feedback to supervisors regarding the inclusion of safety in daily discussions made a major difference. And the last slide, these are safety audits, the same audits that I described in the previous strategy, right? So I took 2 safety auditors and asked them to audit the departments. Before the intervention audits, the 2 groups were the same. After the intervention, significant improvement in safety audits, namely in safety performance, by comparison with the control group. What I've been saying is that safety climate or safety culture is one of the strongest factors that affect safety behavior, and it can improve corporate safety. I've pretty much said. I said that we have to really add to the traditional approach of investing in safety engineering. We have to add the human elements. And the intervention strategies that I described 3 strategies that demonstrate that safety culture can be improved. They can be improved in a cost-effective manner because my intervention don't cost much for the company. And the cost-effectiveness, that's a 3rd bullet that I already mentioned, right? I think it's a very significant aspect in terms of the chances of convincing senior management to invest in safety. Rather than talk about it, let you come in and do whatever you wish to do. And as I said, my consulting mode, I already mentioned it, right? I'd like to share my knowledge with companies and educate safety managers in the company, safety and health managers, how to perform in. Long after I'm gone, they should be able to continue and manage safety, at least safety culture, on their own. And this is pretty much it, and thank you very much.